all of the Alliance RVs come with an inverter prep. The problem is, I have yet to find a video that explains how to do it. So today, we're going to actually use the factory inverter prep and show you how easy it is for you to get an inverter into your RV so that you can go boondocking and power some of your outlets even when you're off grid. Hey, my name is Joe and I'm one half of Two Crazy Campers. And after losing a combined weight of more than 200 pounds, we discovered we had so much more energy for activities. Come along with us as we explore the great outdoors and join us on a brand new adventure. And today's adventure is going to take us into the world of inverters. So right now I am sitting in front of our brand new Alliance Avenue 30BH. And we are loving this RV so far. However, this RV does not have the solar system or inverter system that we had in our Alliance Delta 294RK. In that one, we had several batteries and a big inverter system, and we don't have any of that in here right now. But I want to be able to go on the road and stay in places like Cracker Barrel and stuff like that. So we want to put an inverter in here until I'm able to do the full solar system that I'm looking for. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about the Alliance line and the factory inverter prep that they come with, which means they run wires from the breaker panel inside up to wherever your pass-through is, or in the fifth wheel up here in the front, and make it so that you can add an inverter. The problem is, I have yet to find a video that explains how to do it. So today, we're going to actually use the factory inverter prep and show you how easy it is for you to get an inverter into your RV so that you can go boondocking and power some of your outlets even when you're off grid. So let's go over some of the things that we're going to need. First thing you're going to need is another battery disconnect switch. And I'm going to leave links for all of this stuff down below. But you're going to want to have a battery disconnect switch between the battery and your inverter. Yes, there is one in the RV. You can see it up there, but that's disconnecting the 12 volt to the rig. You want to have another one that's going to disconnect the 12 volt into your inverter. You're also going to need some battery cables, both positive and negative. Now, the size of the battery cable is really going to be dependent on what type of batteries and the amps of the batteries that you're using, as well as what size inverter you're using. If you really want to protect yourself so that you can add more batteries in the future, I would go with a 2-aught or even a 4-aught cable. But for what we're doing today, 1 gauge is going to be more than enough. And also you want to make sure you crimp some terminal connectors on the end. In addition, you're going to need some 10 gauge wire. Now you could be using Romex, or as we're going to use SOOW wire, but you want to make sure you have it connected, and you're going to need 10 gauge wire, and you're going to have black, white, and green in there. You're going to need 2 lengths of wire for in here. The other thing you're going to need is a fuse. So we're going to use a 200 amp fuse. You can see I've already connected everything to kind of prep the video a little bit, but this is going to go between your battery and your inverter. You're going to need some wire nuts or some Wago connectors depending on the wire. I would actually advise using 10 gauge Romex if you can find it. The reason I'm using the SOOW is because I happen to have that laying around, but it would be much easier, and you could definitely use Wago connectors if you use Romex. Again, I don't want to go buy a big length of it when I only need a couple of feet. Now, the last 2 things you're going to need are probably the most important ones, and that is an inverter and a battery. Now, when it comes to the inverter, we're going to use the Renogy 2000 watt inverter. But you can't just get any inverter. You need to have an inverter that has pass-through. A lot of the cheaper inverters don't have pass-through. So what is pass-through? Pass-through is an inverter like this one that is going to allow you to take the shore power, run it into the inverter, and then pass through back to the panel. Basically, it's an auto switch. So when you are connected to shore power, the inverter is off. When you're off of shore power, it's going to use the inverter to supply your power. And you'll know it when you look at the back. So if you look at the back of this one, you have 2 outlets, which most of the inverters are going to have 2 outlets. But the cheaper inverters that don't have pass-through are only going to have 1 section, if any at all, that you could connect to a hardwire like outlet or something like that. This one has 2 because we're going to run the AC power in and then the AC power out. Now, it's really important that you use a pass-through inverter because of the way Alliance has their inverter prep. What they have is a wire, it's a 10 gauge wire that is running from the panel, wherever it is in your RV. For us, it's in our kitchen. It's running up here to the front bay, and then it is connected here, and then it runs back there. So what you're gonna do is basically break that loop and connect it into your inverter. And I will leave links for everything that I'm using down below in the description. Now, the last thing that you are going to need is a battery. Now, since we're doing inverting, definitely want to get a lithium iron phosphate battery. Do not get lead acid batteries. Get lithium iron phosphate. We'll talk about that in a little while, but you definitely want to get lithium iron phosphate. Another question that I know people message me about all the time is, should I get multiple batteries or should I get one big battery? Now, I do want to say right off the bat, I am not an expert on solar by any means. I am not a master electrician. I'm a DIY guy who has a lot of knowledge on how to do this stuff, and I simply show videos on how I'm doing it. Please don't use this video as a tutorial if you don't know what you're doing. If you're afraid of electricity, please consult a licensed electrician or somebody who is certified to install solar. This is a very easy installation, but the bottom line is you're still dealing with electricity, and if you do it wrong, you could hurt yourself and you could hurt your RV. Now, when it comes to whether you should have a large single battery or multiple smaller batteries, my personal opinion is you should have one large battery if you can manage it. Now, I used to be on the other camp. I used to think you were better off to have multiple batteries. However, after doing a lot of research and really starting to understand the way the charging and discharging works, you're better off with a single battery, especially when it comes to lithium iron phosphate, because inside there you have BMSs, and the BMSs, yes, can, balance things out, but you have multiple points of failure, and you have multiple points where you can have one battery slightly charging faster than another battery or slightly discharging faster than another battery, and now you end up with an imbalance, and over time it could affect things. So if you can, get one large battery, figure out what you need. But the nice thing about lithium is you can get one battery and then continue to add on because they have a long lifespan. Now, the battery we're going to be using is this 100 amp hour battery from PowerRus. This is going to be the perfect battery for your weekend warrior RVer, whether you're going and hooking up to shore power or you're just going out and trying to do some boondocking in like a Cracker Barrel parking lot while you drive. It's going to give you enough power for your inverter to watch TV, maybe, make a cup of coffee. It's not going to be enough to be able to run your AC and probably not even your microwave, but it will get you through the night, and then you can have your solar system, charging your battery in the morning. Now let's talk a little about this battery from PowerRus, or however you pronounce it. I'm not quite sure. Now I do want to say in full disclosure, I did not pay for this battery. It was supplied to me for free by PowerRus, and they just asked me if I would take a look at it and see what I thought about it. But they have no say in how I produce the video, what I'm going to use it for, and they don't get to see this video ahead of time. They simply asked me if I would take a look at it, and if I like it, would I consider recommending it? And when I saw the price point, I thought this was a perfect battery for the general RV user. Maybe not somebody who's going to go out boondocking, but if you're just like a weekend warrior, or if you're always hooked up to shore power, this could be a perfect battery for you. I always talk about in RVs, lead acid batteries are old technology and you should never even bother with it for a lot of different reasons. First of all, lead acid batteries are a lot heavier than lithium iron phosphate. They're also more dangerous than lithium iron phosphate batteries because lithium iron phosphate batteries don't catch fire and they don't explode. So it is a much safer option. More importantly though, as I said, a lead acid battery, you cannot drain it below 50% without permanently damaging it, whereas a lithium iron phosphate battery can be drained down to 0 and then you can recharge it without hurting it. In addition, lithium iron phosphate batteries are much lighter and they're gonna last you longer. A lead acid battery is only gonna last you about 2 to 3 years if you don't damage it by discharging it too much, whereas a lithium iron phosphate battery is going to give you 5 to usually 10 years. And even at 10 years, you're usually somewhere around 80% of the battery capacity. So it is going to last you a lot longer. So I'm super excited to be taking a look at this battery because it comes in at a price point, as the time of recording this video, of $219. And when you compare that to current prices of lead acid batteries, that is not a bad price, because the bottom line is this one single 100 amp hour battery is going to be equal to 2 lead acid batteries that are also 100 amp hours. So if you're going to go buy 2 of those, why not just buy 1 of these? The other thing that I really liked about this is, even though it has got a price point of only $219 at the time of recording this video, this one has some features that you usually only see on more expensive batteries. For example, it is a 5.0 Bluetooth function with an app. And it's not just monitoring the BMS and seeing like how are the cells doing. The app is pretty full featured. You can monitor the usage, how many amps it's drawing, how many watts are left. You can look at what the capacity of each cell is, the temperature of the cell. It really has a lot of features. Also, this battery is using grade A+ cells, which is awesome. A lot of times you're going to see the cheaper batteries using like A or even B grade batteries, where they're using brand new A+ cells. Now this one, like I said, is a 100 amp hour battery. That's going to give you about 1280 watt hours. However, a lot of times they do reserve just a little bit of that to keep the Bluetooth function running so that you can continue to check it and check in on your BMS. Now, as far as size, this one is going to come in at 12.8 inches in the length, 6.61 inches in your width, and 8.5 inches tall. And it comes in at 27.5 pounds. So that is much lighter than a lead acid battery of the same exact size. Now, it also has a continuous discharge current of 100 amps. And it also has a max discharge current, if I remember right, I'll put the exact number on the screen, of like 280 amps for like 3 seconds. They also are shipping from a US warehouse, so you're going to get it right away. I believe they are shipping out of California, Texas, and Georgia. Now, like I said, this one actually has some features that only are found on more expensive batteries usually. So aside from the fact that you have the Bluetooth function, this one also comes in with low temp protection, where it is going to stop charging at 32 degrees. It also has a high temp protection, so it's going to stop charging if it gets over 131 degrees. But not only that, it also has a low temp cutoff where it will stop discharging if, I believe, it is below -2 degrees Fahrenheit. So you have a lot of protections built into this battery. It also has an auto balancing function into the BMS, which means you can actually take 4 of these batteries and hook them up either in series or in parallel. So you can build a nice little battery bank and still be less than $1,000. So you think about, for just over $800, almost $900, you're going to have 400 amp hours of battery, which is going to be plenty for a lot of people who are going boondocking, so long as you don't want to run your air conditioner. Now, it also comes in with a 5-year warranty. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this battery, hook it up, and then we're going to see how it performs. So I'm super excited about this battery. I think it's going to be the perfect battery for the average RVer who just wants to get out there and camp and isn't looking to have a giant solar system. I mean, the bottom line, I love my Big Beard battery system that we had in our Alliance Delta 294RK, but not everybody needs 1,200 amp hours of batteries and 1,200 watts of solar on the roof and looking to run 2 ACs and a microwave at the same time. A lot of people just want to get out there and camp hooked up to shore power most of the time, and this is going to probably be the perfect battery for them, especially coming in at the price point of just $220. Let's get into the installation. So the first thing we're going to do is get our battery in here. And I do want to say my setup may look a little bit different than yours. For example, this is the wire that's coming from the solar charge controller. I'm not currently using it because I don't have any solar panels mounted up on my roof, because I'm going to be putting some more stuff in later. Also, I have a heavy gauge wire. This is 6 gauge wire. that is running into my RV for a future solar prep. So we're not going to be utilizing that today. We're going to be using the basic system that you have minus the solar panel, which is going to be a ground wire, which is right here. And then our positive wire, which I have right here. And we're going to just tuck that up so that we don't touch anything with it. And we're going to get our battery hooked in here. Next thing we're going to do is take our battery cable and we're going to hook it up to our disconnect switch. And I want to hook it up to the disconnect switch first. And we're also going to make sure our disconnect switch is off. This way, when we connect it to the battery, we can make sure we're not getting any power into the battery. Now, after we have our battery disconnect switch, we're going to go ahead and connect our fuse, which I said I've already done here. So this is a 200 amp fuse. And you're going to have one side going into the fuse and then the other side coming out. And then this is going to go into our inverter. And for negative, we just need a negative cable. You could also add in the Victron Smart Shunt if you want. But like I said, the battery we're using actually has an app for that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and connect my negative cable because we won't need it anymore. We only need to have the two connections, the one that goes to the RV and then the one that goes to the inverter. But I'm not going to connect the positive yet, and that's just for safety purposes. Now, while we're doing that, what we're going to do is we're just going to hook up the RV power while we're getting the actual inverter in, and that's just so that we can start charging up this battery. A lot of times they come in like a sleep mode, and we want to get this thing charging from the RV. So we're not going to hook up the inverter wire. We're just going to hook up the 12 volt. Now that we've done that, we can start working on the inverter. So right here behind this plate is our loop wire. So we have our ground, we have our neutral, and then we have our hot. The problem here is you have two wires coming in, going into a Wago connector. You can see here. So you have two whites, two blacks, two grounds. We don't know which one is line and which one is load. What I mean by that is we need to figure out which wire is coming from the shore power, the line power, and which one is going back to the panel, the load power. And it's really important to know that because on the back of your inverter, if you can see it, you have one is marked input and one is marked output. So we have to take the line, the one that is coming from shore power, and go to input, and then the load, the one that is going back to the panel, and put that to the output one. So what we're gonna have to do is go turn off the power. This is where it gets a little sketchy. Disconnect it, grab our multimeter, turn back on the power, and figure out which one is line and which one is load. So just looking at our volt tester, we're going to look up here, and you can see we've got 120 volts up here. And then, trying to do this with one hand, we've got nothing here. So now that we know which one is hot, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, obviously if you have the electricity off, we're going to cap off the one that is hot. Now we're going to start hooking up our batteries. We'll put our negative cable on right here. Put the positive cable on this side. Again, it's still not connected to the battery. Go ahead and make sure they're nice and tight. Try to wiggle your battery. Next we're going to do is go ahead and put on the covers. Before we hook it up to the RV, we're going to go ahead and test this. First thing we're going to do is make sure our battery is off. What I'm actually going to do is I'm not even going to connect it, the RV yet. I'm just going to connect the battery directly to the inverter just in case there's a problem. I don't want to fry my RV. Go ahead and turn this on, turn this on. And the inverter works. We're going to go grab something and plug it in and see if we get power. Kind of funny, everything I own is battery operated. I don't have anything that plugs in. So we're going to plug in our internet because this is something that I would want to power through the inverter if we're on the road. And we've got power. Okay, so we ran into a slight problem. Problem is, this is using push connectors. So unfortunately, because of this inverter and the way it sets up, I'm going to need Romex. I can't use the SOW wire because of the push connect. I even tried off camera to put in wire ferrules and see if I can get it that way, but the wire ferrules that I have don't fit in there because they have a plastic end on it. So we're gonna have to get some Romex. The real problem for me is that Lowe's and Home Depot do not sell 10-2 Romex by the foot. So I'd have to buy a minimum of a 25-foot roll, which is like $80. And that's kind of ridiculous because I really only need like 4 feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a wire whip where it's already inside of either a flexible Romex or a metal conduit. This honestly is just a temporary job, but I just don't need a lot of 10-2 Romex. I have a lot of 10 gauge stranded wire, like where it's just THHN, but I don't have any kind of whip or anything like that. And again, it's stranded. So we're just going to get that. So we'll pick this up tomorrow. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is mount the inverter and stuff up on the wall. And we'll do that off camera because this really is just about showing you how to hook it up and what you're going to need. And obviously, because again, the inverter that I have, the way it connects, I don't have the right stuff. So it's the next morning and I went to Home Depot, and like I said, they don't have any 10-2 Romex that they sell by the foot. Everything they have is a minimum of a 25-foot roll. So that really wasn't gonna work because I'm not gonna really use 10-2 Romex that often. So the other options they had was to buy some just flexible plastic conduit and use that and then insert my own THHN in it and then put ferrules on the end for the push connect. But it was actually cheaper for me to buy a 25-foot roll of 10-2 solid core inside of this metal conduit. So that's what we went with. And I've just cut off 2 pieces about 2.5 to 3 feet in length. I didn't measure it. I just kind of laid it out to see what size we need. So we're going to go ahead and use this. The other thing I got were these 1-inch to 1/2-inch spacers for the metal box. I'll show you why right now. So if you look at the box that Alliance is using for the inverter prep, there's no 1/2-inch knockouts on the side. These are, it looks like 3/4 inch. For some reason, when I was in the store, I thought that they were 1-inch holes, but it looks like now they're 3/4 inch. So your choices, or at least my choices, would be to drill a 1/2-inch hole into this and then use my 1/2-inch conduit, or go ahead and just pop the whole thing out and use an adapter. So that's what we're gonna do. So while we're here, let me show you how we mounted everything. I just put the inverter right up here, and then we have our positive going up there, going into a fuse. I do have a cover for the fuse. That goes down into our battery disconnect switch, and then that cable comes down into the battery. And then we have our negative cable that's coming up this way, going into here. And then again, here is the inverter prep. Now I am using more battery cable than I need. You can see how it kind of loops around. And generally, you do want to use the shortest distance that you can possibly do to go from your battery to the inverter so that you can avoid any kind of voltage drop. But as I said earlier, this is just a temporary inverter situation for me until I do my entire off-grid package. So I just want to have something, and I had these battery cables, and I don't want to trim them down because I'm only doing it for a little while, because again, cable is expensive. So I decided to use what I have. This way I can always use them again in the future. Now let's get into actually wiring the inverter to the RV. So all we have to do is line these up, and we're gonna go green, give it a good push in, make sure it's locked in. Next one over is our neutral, and then we have our hot. So we're just gonna get that in there, and then we're gonna grab a pair of needle nose or something to give it a good push, because it's a little bit harder to work with 10 gauge wire. And now we're gonna do the same thing on the top. We have neutral, line, and ground. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is take the conduit and push it up a little bit more. Now we just need to run the conduit through this back plate. So we're just gonna slide it in and then push it up. So unfortunately, when you put this cover on this particular inverter, the labels are actually covered up. So you have to remember, the bottom is going to be your input and the top is gonna be your output. So instead of using a wire nut for the ground, we're gonna use a 5-way Wago connector. Now for the hot, what we can do is just take this one out, and then we'll grab another Wago connector. So now that can get tucked in. this one on here. So we had to move the output one to the bottom here because when I trimmed off the metal conduit on here, I trimmed a little bit too much and it wasn't going to be enough to get in there. So we just moved that. I did that off camera. So now we're just going to put in the one that feeds back into the RV. And now we can just hook up our hot neutral with 2 more Wago connectors. Okay, so that part is all done. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put our plate on. Tighten this down. Okay, last thing to do is go ahead and test this system. So what we're going to do is come over here and we're going to turn on our battery. Then we're going to come up here and we're going to turn on the inverter. Well, that's a good sign. It turned on, so far it is working. Now, there is an app for this particular inverter, and the inverter that you're using is actually going to determine whether or not you have an app or whatever. So I'm going to pull it open and see what's going on. And I'm recording my screen for you. So right now, it's got output volts of 120 volts, 0.63 amps. Ignore the chickens. And right now, it says that we are at 13.1 volts for our battery. We had our battery down because we were doing some other things. What we're going to do is we're going to go inside and we're going to see what is actually functioning on the inverter right now. So let's walk around and see what is working. First of all, I can tell you right now the microwave is working. So the microwave is hooked up to that inverter, but again, with a 100 amp hour battery, you're not going to get much out of it. You might be able to run the microwave 1 or 2 times. You definitely would need a lot more power. The microwave is probably going to draw somewhere around 1100, 1200 watts. So if you had the microwave on, you wouldn't be able to have a lot of other things on, but you would be able to run the microwave, probably a TV, something like that. Again, a lot of it's going to be dependent on our battery power. So we do have the kitchen over here. SodaStream works. We're going to go in the back and we're going to check. I'm seeing right here the light is on for the television and my internet is on. That's something that's very important to me, is that when I'm on the road, if I'm pulled over at like a Cracker Barrel or something like that, I want to be able to have my internet tower. So that is a good thing. I see the outlets over here are on because Rachel's got that light plugged into there. So that is working. This is going to be the most important thing because I don't know about you, and I know that this is a really bad habit, but I like to watch television in bed, especially when I'm getting ready to go to sleep. So TV has to work. And it does. So that is really good. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually leave this television on. We're going to use this app and we're going to see if it can tell us how many volts we're pulling. I don't know if the app is going to work inside the RV, but let's go ahead and turn on the microwave because right now it says, okay, 5% out of my 2000 watts. I'm drawing 0.88 amps. Let's go run the microwave for a second. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to set it for 1 minute. We won't run it that long. And again, I don't know if the app will work from the front to all the way up here to tell me what's going on, but the microwave is running right now. I don't know what, the range of this Bluetooth app is, because right now it's not changing at all, but that doesn't really matter to me. And this video isn't necessarily about the inverter. It's more about how to hook the inverter up using the factory prep that comes from Alliance. So, okay, it is updating here. And it says I'm currently using 87% of my 2000 watts and I'm drawing 14.56 amps. While we're doing this, let's go ahead and take a look at the battery itself and see if we can connect to the battery here. So the battery has its own app and I don't know if I can connect to it from here. We may have to go out into the front bay. Here it is, connect. It's connecting. And right now, it says my battery is 88% full. And it does say I have a maximum voltage of 3.30. It's telling me that we have a total voltage of 13.2. What the current is, negative 20 amps. And it is telling me that right now, my remaining discharge time, and again, this is a 100 amp hour battery, is 4 hours and 16 minutes. Let's go ahead and restart this microwave and see if it affects this app at all. Okay, so immediately it says the remaining discharge time running this microwave has dropped to 31 minutes. But again, that's because we're drawing so much. But the app does work, so this is going to be a good way to see, how everything is going on. The last thing I want to do is check the automatic transfer, because right now we have the inverter running. So what we're going to do is we're going to run out to the outside now, and we're going to turn the power back on at the pole and see what happens in the app. What we should see in the app is the inverter stop inverting and switch back over to shore power. So we did install a power pole here at our farm. I've got a 50 amp and a 20 amp, and we're gonna go ahead and we're going to turn this on. Again, stuff already has power in the RV because the inverter is running. Never want to just flip everything on. If you have a bunch of stuff plugged in, you want to turn that stuff off first. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn this on. I think I'm a little far away, so we're going to go out to the front and take a look at it with the app. Okay, so that worked. Right now on the app, it is showing that it's not running. So we have output volts of 121.2, which is the pass-through. Output amps is 0 amps. Output hertz 0, because again, we're running the pass-through. Now, a couple of things that I did find out about this inverter, and again, this video is not about the inverter, but I think a lot of them are gonna be the same way, and that is when we're using the pass-through, this inverter always has to be in the on position. If we turn it off, or if I turn off the battery, then it will not pass any power through, which means no air conditioning. Now, the way that this particular RV, the Alliance Avenue 30BH is, and I'm sure a lot of the other fifth wheels, because it's a 50 amp rig, if we were to turn this off, the other leg actually controls the bedroom AC, but the main leg is going to be the living space AC. So if I were to leave this off or turn this off, turn off this other battery, then what would happen is I would have power in the very front of the RV, but nothing in the living space. Hey, this is Editing Joe. I wanted to break into the video real quick and let you know I've done some more testing with this inverter prep, and I've learned, at least on our RV, the 3000 watt inverter prep that we installed is controlling all of the outlets inside of the RV. So our bedroom, the bathroom, and the back bunk room. It's also controlling the main AC, the one that is over the kitchen and the living space. So it doesn't control the one that's in the bunk room, and it doesn't control the one that's in the bedroom. However, it is controlling the main one, which means that if you put a large enough battery bank, just using this factory inverter prep, you can run your main AC. It also means if you don't put a large enough battery in there, make sure you turn off your AC if you're gonna start using the inverter. Now let's get back to the video. But overall, that is exactly, working the way I wanted it to work, and that's how you install an inverter with the factory prep from Alliance. Now, before we end the video, I do want to take a few seconds to talk a little bit more about the PowerRus battery. So far, I am very impressed with it. Now, we haven't had it for a long time, so I can't speak to the long-term reliability of it, but it does come with a 5-year warranty, and they have been around for a little while. I've even looked at some old videos after we tested with it, and not too long ago, this battery was selling for over $400. So coming in at that $210 price range as of the time that we're recording this video, that is phenomenal. And I think I may have even misspoken earlier. I feel like I may have said $220. But again, on the website at the time that we're recording the video, it is $210.99. And I think what you get with this battery for that makes it a very good value. Now, I did do a load test on it overnight, and we were able to draw 1,253 watt hours out of it. So that is coming in at just less than what they claim at 1,280 watt hours. However, like I said earlier in the video, I think they're reserving just a little bit of that to keep the Bluetooth and the BMS going. So it's probably got it where they're not letting it discharge below 99%. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But again, if you are looking for a battery, use the link that we have down below in the description box. That's going to save you some money. And again, the price currently is $210.99. And I think that this would be a great battery for someone who just wants to get out an RV and is mostly connected to shore power, whether they have an inverter or they don't have an inverter. I do want to give a special shout out. Thank you to PowerRus for supplying us with this battery. I know that we will be using it in several different locations. Now, once again, just a reminder, I am not an electrician. I'm a DIY guy who likes to do everything myself. And the purpose of this video is not necessarily a how-to, it's how I do it. And so do with that information what you will. Now, if the video did help you in any way, please do us a favor. Head down below, hit the like button on this video. That's going to do two things. Number one, it does help build our channel, but more importantly, it's going to let us know what kind of videos you guys are looking to see. Also, while you're down there, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little bell button. This way you are notified every time we upload a new video. And until next time, happy camping.